from like a traction standpoint, we were like, there's no way we're not going to get an offer or a deal. And then we didn't even get an offer. And so we were both it was an emotional roller coaster. But one thing that happened was the day after we filmed, it was the day that news broke that Toys R Us had filed for bankruptcy. And so I think the Sharks knew a lot of information that we didn't even know about the traditional toy industry at that time.
Podcasting from Boulder, Colorado. This is the Baby Got Backstory podcast, where we dive into the story behind the story of today's most inspiring storytellers, creators, and entrepreneurs. I like big backstories, and I cannot lie. I am your host, Mark Gutman. I'm Mark Gutman, and on today's episode of Baby Got Backstory, how two best friends started telling stories of sloths and Bigfoot for fun and turned it into a multi-million-dollar business while being co-CEOs and still remaining best friends. Now, if you like and enjoy the show, please take a minute or two to rate and review us over at iTunes. iTunes uses these as part of the algorithm that determines ratings on the Apple charts. And ratings help us to build an audience, which then helps us to continue to produce this show. And lastly, this show is all about creating value for you as well as opening up a dialogue. I realize I'm usually the one doing all the talking, but please, let's start the conversation. I am at Mark Gutman on all social channels. You can always send an email to podcast@wildstory.com with your thoughts and comments. If you have any great ideas for guests, please let me know. All suggestions are welcome. As you're about to hear, Slumberkins are plush toys with a corresponding story that are designed to help parents and children have difficult conversations, to adding a new family member, to losing possessions in a house fire, or even, yes, a global pandemic. They are communication portals that allow us to have those hard conversations in a way that are authentic, real, and positive. And of course, I love that this business is based all around story and the power that story has to provide meaning and clarity around some of life's most challenging moments. From the moment Callie, Christensen, and Callie Oriard met in high school, they were fast friends destined to build a company their own way. And this is their story. So I'm here with Callie Oriard and Callie Christensen, the founders of Slumberkins. Welcome to the Baby Got Backstory podcast.
Thank you. We're excited to be here.
Yes, thank you.
Very, very excited. And before we get going, can you tell us what are Slumberkins? What is Slumberkins?
Slumberkins are a line of plush creatures matched with therapeutic storylines in board book form that we've created as a teacher and a therapist to really support parents in promoting and supporting their children's emotional wellness at home. So each of our creatures addresses a different skill, and we have a full spectrum and range from skill sets like relaxation and growth mindset, authenticity, to kind of a more supportive range of anxiety reduction and even a collection for grief and loss.
So help me understand that a little further. Like treat me like I'm 5. You know, like how do Slumberkins come into my life?
Well, we have a lot of parents or grandparents that find Slumberkins through social media or online or at some select retailers. They are adorably cute stuffed creatures. And as a parent, when you receive one, it is really the book and the interactive storyline that draws people in. I think once you get the creature, you read the storyline and do a positive affirmation interactively with the child, kind of feel the magic of the kind of intent of what we're trying to get through with Slumberkins.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit more about that intent? What is that?
Yeah, so I'm a marriage and family therapist and worked as a school counselor, but also with families, addressing lots of different needs for modern families. And some of the more prevalent ones that came up at the practice and in the school were issues around relaxation, were issues around self-esteem for kids, topics like family change, parents who are going through a divorce. And those are can be such big topics that it's hard to figure out or know how to have conversations that actually have actionable steps to instill the skills that you're wanting to help your child with in those moments. So, for example, the Bigfoot storyline follows Bigfoot through a story where kids make fun of him. He feels really hurt and bad about himself. There's coping strategies thrown in there of how to calm your body down by taking deep breaths. And the story is interactive so that the reader and the child are interacting, answering questions back and forth. And it's inserting kind of therapeutic questions and thinking that I would be facilitating if I was sitting in a family therapy session, and ending with an interactive affirmation. So at the end, Bigfoot's affirmation is, I am kind, I am strong, I'm brave and unique. The world is better because I am here and I like me. And when a child is saying that back and forth with you, it's a really amazing thing to try to give to a child so that they're able to, pick themselves back up after having a moment like that.
Yeah. And so I like to say that most businesses are started from either inspiration, frustration, or desperation. Why not just what was the old way? First of all, if you can kind of tell us, before Slumberkins, how were you achieving this goal or addressing this problem? And then why not just do that? What was the impetus to do it a new way?
I think when we started Slumberkins, so I think we started out of inspiration. We were both on a maternity leave with our now 4-year-old sons from our roles as educators. So I'm a special education teacher, and Callie, like she said, was a marriage and family therapist and school counselor. And we had this moment of also being, new moms to our new babies and thinking of ways that down the road we were seeing students come into our lives in our world of education, and kind of knowing, what's down the road for them if they're not given the emotional supports from the earliest of years, because we were both supporting students on the social emotional aspect of learning, and thinking about ways that, well, number one, we know that early intervention is so important, and the messages are always going to be more impactful for a child coming from the parent. So how could we create a resource to get them into the parents' hands so that it prevents a lot of the, different social emotional issues that we would see as educators. And so I think that for us, it was coming from twofold, as a parent perspective and an educator perspective, and kind of creating a resource that really didn't exist out there that we both wanted for our own selves too.
Yeah. And that's usually the best way to start a business or a product, is to do it for yourself. It's, and answer that need. And thank you for sharing that. If could each of you give me a sense of, you're both, educators, you both have a lot of schooling in this area. If you could even go back and tell me a little bit about, your childhood, kind of what that was like for you, where you were raised, why you even have an interest in education and studying education to such an advanced degree, and end it with how the both of you met.
Sure. So I'll go first. I was raised, I'm an only child, and my parents had me at a very late age. My mom was 42. And so I very much, was the apple of my parents' eye. But I'm also very tall. I'm 6'2", and my parents are both very tall. And I think my mom knew I was going to be very tall as well. And so I experienced kind of this, lots of moments with my mom where she was feeding me a lot of positive affirmations that I did end up being 6 feet in 6th grade. And I think as a very tall person at that young of age, in a social aspect, kids say mean things without understanding how they land. They weren't intentionally trying to be bullies or anything like that. I was just different. And so for me, I very much have a heartfelt connection with our Bigfoot character that's about promoting self-esteem through positive affirmations. And it was kind of, Callie wrote the storyline kind of based on my experience, as well as a mixture of a little bit with her husband too, who also is very tall. And so, but I would always lean back on those moments of positivity that my mom infused into my life. And, I think I attribute my ability to kind of brush it off and kind of stay resilient and optimistic to her doing that. And so I think the Bigfoot story in particular is a manifestation of giving parents kind of the set of words and tools of the affirmation of, Bigfoot's affirmation is, I am kind, I am strong, I am brave and unique. The world is better because I am here and I like me. And so if you hear a child say that at a very young age, like say age 2, it's just a moment that really matters in that child's life. And those words become their inner voice and their reality. And so it just becomes this really powerful moment between parent and child. And so that's kind of like my heartfelt connection around my personal experience as a child with the kind of inspiration for the product. But then, I became a special education teacher and an elementary school teacher. I have my master's degree and endorsements in both areas. And, I really went into the world of education based on an experience I had as a peer mentor in high school to a student that was a classmate of ours that experiences autism and, was pretty high functioning on the spectrum of autism, but she definitely, had a lot of kind of she had a lot of experiences in high school that were not positive socially for her. And I kind of became her friend and protector and mentor in a couple of our classes, and I loved it. And so when I, thought about the pathway that I wanted to go into, I really focused in on special education.
Yeah. And this is Callie. So for me, my childhood, I have an older brother. My mom is a psychologist and my dad is a longshoreman. So interesting pairing there. But I think I always just kind of modeled myself after my mother and was interested in psychology and interested in being a counselor because I saw her doing that. And it did fit my personality. I think, through the process of becoming a therapist, because I went to school, got my undergrad in psychology, and then went back for my master's in marriage and family therapy and school counseling. I kind of was able to examine my life a little bit further and do a lot of personal work and healing around just my childhood, which I think a lot of people experience that, our parents are always doing the best they can. And I truly believe that people try their best most times, but I think we all have wounds and things that have caused us to be the way that we are or feel less than in some ways. And that's what drives us sometimes. And I kind of uncovered through my work of becoming a therapist that some of those things that were driving me. And so Slumberkins really became a way to try to intervene at the youngest ages and almost give children what I wished was available to me at an early age as well. So even when people ask me, oh, well, what's your favorite Slumberkins? I can never answer because I feel like every single one of them is just a little piece of this larger healing puzzle that is really important to me, but I also see in a lot of the people in my life. So yeah, it's been quite a journey. And Callie and I were lucky enough to, meet each other early on in this journey. We met our freshman year in high school, and both being tall girls at school, I was also tall, and we both played sports and just kind of bonded over our similarities there and sort of did a lot of things in life around the same time. So both went on to college at the same time, both played professionally, our sports respectively after college for a short time, and both had interest in helping kids and families. So when we were doing our masters and our studies, stayed in touch, and it just kind of made sense to start a business together because we were both really passionate about it and, spent all of our time together when we could anyways.
Ah, so many questions. Thank you for that. So, what sports were you playing and playing professionally?
I played volleyball, and Callie was a basketball player.
Oh, very cool. So you're in the tall girls club in school there. What do you remember that first day? Do you remember that first day you met?
Volleyball tryouts? Yeah.
Take me back there. Yeah. What was it like?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think that when you're a tall, awkward 14-year-old, you kind of scan the room, and the moment that you find someone else that's a little bit tall and awkward kind of feeling, you just have this immediate bond. And then I would say that we became we became friends through volleyball, but then it wasn't really until I think we were Spanish 101 table partners, and Callie speaks Spanish fluently now, but at the time she was way more comfortable speaking Spanish. And so we got in this really kind of like awkward, but like new friendship where she would push me in Spanish to be a little bit more vulnerable with trying to like speak Spanish. And I don't know, I guess we bonded over Spanish 101.
What was the word that you just couldn't, or the phrase that you could just never get? What were you always stuck on?
Oh, it's just all of it for me.
I remember what it was for Callie.
What was it?
She would always say me lamo. I'm like, Callie, it's me llamo.
I had no context in learning other languages. Like I was a very kind of sheltered child also.
Oh, that's so great. And is that fit with your recollection, Callie?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally.
All right. So you both went on, but you were friends, and you're in the so-called tall girls club, and you're going off and doing some cool things and playing sports and going on to build your careers. And did you ever think that you would be business partners or entrepreneurs even before that?
No, I mean, I think we knew we would always be best friends and in each other's lives. I have this funny memory of when I was pregnant with my son, my first son. I went on a little baby moon to New Orleans with my husband, and I saw a psychic, and she told me that I was going to be an entrepreneur and a business owner. And I remember telling Callie, I had the worst reading ever. This lady thought that I was going to have a business, and she's crazy. That's so insane, because we were working in education. So I just was for sure going to retire an educator. And sure enough, the business started up after I had my son.
So tell me a little bit about that. So the way I understand the story, and please correct me, is that you were both first-time mothers. Were you both pregnant? Why don't you just kind of take me back to how it happened?
Yeah. So it was my second son. And so I had done it 3 or 4, almost 4 years previously. And so when Kelly's son was born, he was very colicky, and it was really difficult for her at home with him. And so I would bring my son Owen over, and we would just get her out of the house, and we would go on walks and just try to give her some relief of being cooped up in the house with a colicky baby, because that is it's a very hard thing for any mother or any parent with a colicky child. And so I think it was this just kind of natural support system that went into place of us kind of hanging out daily, going on a lot of nature walks here in the beautiful Pacific Northwest, and just feeling really inspired, talking about some of the students that we were working with simultaneously, that then we just had an idea to, both of us had brief histories in knowing how to sew. My mom had me take sewing lessons when I was 12, and Kelly's mom is a seamstress and had taught her how to sew. And so we decided to try our hand at making a prototype, or try to make what we would want to sell as a product in the form of a redesigned kind of lovey blanket, and with more unique creatures than what was out there on the market. So this was kind of before sloths became very popular. And so it was, our first creatures were sloth and Bigfoot. And so Callie, and they always were going to be paired with a story. So, it was on these walks that we would come up with these ideas that Bigfoot, he should promote self-esteem because he gets bullied, and, how is he going to be resilient? And then so Callie would go home and she would write the storyline. I'd work on some of the designs. And then sometimes we'd head over to Kelly's parents' house, and they'd hold our babies, and we'd work on sewing. And then it was just this really fun kind of creative time, because we always say we had so much free time, but I use air quotes around that because we were also mothers, big, with babies too. And they came everywhere with us. And so it was just this fun creative moment. And then we decided, okay, let's actually try to sell some of these at a local craft fair. So we signed up for a holiday bazaar, and we ended up, because we were educators and we were on maternity leave, we were broke. And so we had to borrow $200 from Kelly's mom to go buy some fabric. And we said, okay, if we sell any of these, we'll pay you back that $200. And so we went and bought $200 worth of fabric, made like 20 to 30 versions of the first edition of what we now call Slumberkins. And, I also say self-published because basically Kelly wrote the storylines of the poem and we printed it on cardstock and bound the creatures around the storyline of cardstock and bound them up with twine and sold them at local craft fairs. And it was so great because we were getting real-time feedback from people that we were interacting with. As the great part is that we are educators and we're standing there talking about the useful case for this in people's lives. And we didn't know how they were going to do, but we ended up selling out at the first craft fair and feeling like we were on top of the world because we turned that $200 into something, I think like $700. And then, so we took that $700 and we just bought I think $700 worth of fabric and then made it more and went to another craft fair, sold out. And it just kind of steamrolled like that for a while. And that was in like November of 2015. And we ended up saying, okay, let's put this on Etsy I think it was January, or maybe it was December. It was December, January of like 2015, 2016. And then it was really through Instagram and Etsy that it just started to steamroll in that same way, but even at a higher pace because of just the nature of, an open marketplace and traffic from all over, that we could not keep up with demand. So it was definitely this like handmade side hustle. And we also had to go back to our jobs as educators at that time too. So it was kind of a crazy time in those days.
I bet. And so I kind of want to go back. I mean, your mom's, you're just trying to get out of the house. You're walking around. Like, I'm still a little confused. Doesn't sound like you really were sitting there being like, we have a great idea for a business. Like, take me back to that moment. What was the great idea? You were like, let's do what?
I mean, I think it was let's do something together that's fun and that tries to affect the problem that we're seeing in the world at large. I mean, the problem in the schools was getting worse and worse. And I think we're just two people that have fun in everything. We love having fun together and by doing things together. So it was our little step at achieving each milestone. Like, so it started with craft fairs and then we saw, hey, people like it, let's keep going. So we always had a big dream about where it could go, especially having these characters and these storylines, right? The big dream being one day there could be Slumberkins on ice, but I think we just were taking it one little step at a time and getting really excited about every little bit of traction and every win because we fully didn't expect that we were going to be entrepreneurs or that we were going to have successful business. So everything felt like a win.
It sounded like that even going back to that first day though, that like you were just doing this and correct me if I'm wrong, out of the pure fun and experimentation and the joy of it. It didn't sound like even before the craft fair, the way Callie told it was the craft fair was a little bit of an afterthought. It was like, we'll try this out. But what I'd really interested to hear is like you're walking. I don't know if you're in the woods or on a bike path or where you're at, but you're walking and you're like, all right, let's make these creatures and we're gonna do a sloth and a Bigfoot. And tell me a little bit more about that. Like why? Like, and where does sloth and Bigfoot come from? Why Bigfoot? Why sloth?
Well, I think that as educators, I mean, my job, I worked in a therapeutic day treatment school. And a lot of the instruction that I was doing around teaching emotional wellness for kids and social emotional skills and supporting positive behaviors with behavior intervention plans, a lot of what I was doing with them from an actionable basis was sitting there and like writing out social stories to explain a situation and, how they can turn it around and like give an example. And so from a intervention standpoint as a teacher, I was like, these just need to come with social stories. But then Kelly is a natural poet. She's always been able to write poetry. And then she's also, as a therapist, like took it to a whole new level of understanding from a deep therapeutic level, how to create positive attachments between like parent and child. And so she was able to infuse these kind of interactive moments within each storyline that is kind of, I think, the magic component where it really creates this meaningful moment between a parent and child when they're reading the storyline. And then I think we just wanted to do something that was so different than what was out there on the market. And I mean, being from the Pacific Northwest, there's a lot of people here that actually believe in Bigfoot. And I mean, I'm not one of those people, but I really like to, I love the character of Bigfoot because I definitely felt all like weird and unique as a child. And so, and then sloth was just like, Callie really liked the idea of a sloth too back then. And the storyline for sloth is an actual therapeutic progressive muscle relaxation routine. And it's kind of funny, a couple of years into this, I started to seek out a therapist to help with like stress and anxiety. Because, why would I be stressed out like being an educator and running a business? And I go in and like one of the first meetings, she was like, well, have you heard of progressive muscle relaxation? And I was like, yes. And she's like, well, it looks like you just need to maybe use your own tools in our own toolkit. But so it's really cool to see that Callie's therapeutic expertise she's able to somehow distill it down and make it so easy to use for anyone to implement. I mean, I think of it as kind of a stealth social emotional support for families because they don't even realize the positive impacts that they're doing with their child when they're reading these storylines with their children.
This episode brought to you by Wild Story. Wait, isn't that your company? It is. And without the generous support of Wild Story, this show would not be possible. A brand isn't a logo or a tagline or even your product. A brand is a person's gut feeling about a product, service, or company. It's what people say about you when you're not in the room. Wild Story helps progressive founders and savvy marketers build purpose-driven brands that connect their business goals with the customers they want to serve so that both the business and the customer needs are met. This results in crazy, happy, loyal customers that purchase again and again, and this is great for business. If that sounds like something you and your team might want to learn more about, reach out at www.wildstory.com and we'd be happy to tell you more. Now back to our show. Why are stories and storylines so important to the success of your mission and your product?
Well, I think story in general is so much of the human experience, right? It's how we connect. It's how we are able to have empathy, to tune into an experience. Story is used so early on with kids. I mean, the trend also was, when we were having our kids, that people didn't want cards at their birthday or their baby showers. They wanted books because everybody wanted to be reading stories to their children. And when we were thinking about the intentionality of those books, even, of course, it's nice to have fun books that are just more about, light subjects or comedy or things like that. The stories that really impart really meaningful messages are hard to come by. And so we really wanted to infuse both of those into one and kind of make mascots for these really deep emotional support pieces that we were hoping to infuse. And I think it was sort of also a swing in the dark because there wasn't a model in the way that we were doing it of what that looked like very much. And so we were just really, again, excited that it was resonating and that when people got a hold of the stories or did them with their children and had the Slumberkins and had their snugglers, that the message came through and the intent was realized. I always felt surprised by that. I had hoped that it would happen, but I mean, everybody hopes that when you make a product, but you never know until it's out there if it's going to do what you intend. So.
And I think too, looking at it through the lens of a child, I'm going to think of it through maybe like my 4-year-old son's eyes now. That as a child, you're given this, cute, snuggly creature. I mean, the plush toy market is huge. So, at my house, we have lots of different cute, snuggly creatures. But then you're given this one creature that matches a storyline that then becomes part of kind of this like intentional bedtime routine that you do with your parent. And it's, when you think about bedtime and parenting is the moment that you're able to kind of just make the most like connection with your child. There's not anything distracting, and so thinking through it from their eyes, they're remembering that character or that creature represents and they don't even realize this, but it reminds them of that connected, engaged time that all children are seeking, especially in this day and age of, parents on their phones all the time, especially right now with everyone is so over consuming social media and content because, rightly so in this day and age but children are also seeking that connectedness. And I think that the mascots of the creatures themselves and the storylines just kind of like solidify their kind of love mark on that creature.
Super interesting. And thinking about those storylines and the storytelling, what's hard about that? What don't we know or what don't we see? The storylines, I'm assuming, need to be clean and fairly simple and straightforward. So, someone if it's done right, that's the way it seems. But, what's hard about that for you?
Well, I had no experience being an author. So I didn't really have a formal training around what are the rules that you should follow to make it come through that way. So, in general, I just took a swing. Working with young kids helped me in my understanding of what words hit with them best in understanding big situations, because I had that experience under my belt as working as a marriage and family therapist and school counselor, explaining big feelings or difficult situations to children. That was a lot of my job. So I was able to kind of take those words and bring them into the storytelling format. But yeah, I don't know. I would say it continues to be hard. And I would probably, somebody with a writing background might look at my stories and say those aren't very good. But, I feel like kids resonate with it because it's at their level. So I'm hoping that with time, as we continue to grow and refine how we tell stories and how we expand on the tool that is each one of the first books that come with each character, that we, continue to improve. But I'm sure there's room for improvement.
I have like a funny story about this, because when we first were, when we had that initial traction and we also needed to go back to school, we were a little bit like, oh man, what are we going to do about this? So I tried to pitch the Bigfoot storyline to multiple book agents and publishing houses and got very polite no's. I love the idea of what you guys are trying to do, but no, thank you. And then and I'm one that just doesn't take no for an answer. So then I was just like, all right, we're just going to keep going on our own. And then it was funny. We were at this conference where we were listening about like how to get a storyline published. And someone on stage was like, don't ever publish your first draft. And we just sat there and giggled because we just like have always published the first draft of everything.
Well, when it's great, it's great. When you know. So
and they were talking about like, if a children's book is successful, it will maybe sell 10,000 copies. And we're sitting there in this audience, like wanting expert advice and going, oh my gosh, we've sold like over 60,000 copies already of our first drafts. And so it was like kind of this moment. This was a couple years ago now. And it was just this moment of like, okay, we're fine. We're onto something. Self-publishing, getting a book like quote unquote published by the experts is a wonderful avenue for many people that want to go that route. But for us, it wasn't the route for Slumberkins.
Yeah, and so let's take a step back and go back. I'm envisioning that first craft fair. $200, you parlay it into $700. Sounds like you parlay it into like some more. You start building, but it's, you're in this like, all right, we've got a hobby. We've got like maybe a side hustle business. Like take me back there. And at what point does it start to inflect and you start to think, oh my gosh, this might really be something?
Well, we definitely didn't have a business plan mapped out. And I think the first time that we realized that we needed that was when we went to go deposit that money in a bank. And they're like, you need a business plan for your business bank account. And so then Callie and I had to open up a personal joint checking account while we worked on a business plan. And I think it was really probably, I think there were multiple points, but one that really stands out was when we got through that first holiday season and we had pretty much gone to all the local fabric stores and bought out all of their plush fabric that we could get our hands on to sew more and more creatures. I mean, we were sewing hundreds of these things at this point.
All by yourselves? I mean, are your fingers are bleeding? I mean, type thing?
Yep. Yes. All by ourselves. It was crazy. I mean, there was like fur everywhere. It was a hustle. But what
are your families saying about this? I have to imagine it's quite disruptive. And what's going on like at the house?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it was our poor husbands were, tolerating it, to say the least. But they also were excited to see the traction too. And so, but one of the moments I think for us, when I think back, was when the fabric stores were sold out. We were thinking about spring. It was spring 2016. And we needed to think of what we were going to do for fabric because the stores hadn't replenished from holiday yet. And so I went to a retail store and bought out all of their plush blankets, like the big, home decor blankets. And then in order to have fabric to make into Slumberkins, we were deconstructing blankets to then make into Slumberkins to sell for Easter of 2016. And I think that was a moment of okay, when we're buying out the aisles of blankets to deconstruct them for fabric, maybe we're onto something here.
Well, and you'd mentioned that, and something that caught my attention was that the plush market is huge. I mean, you can't go anywhere without, either picking up a plush toy for free. I mean, I spend, a good amount of time in my parenting getting rid of plush toys because we just have so many. I mean, how did you think that the two of you had any chance at competing in a market like that?
I mean, I think it's the storylines that really set us apart in that sense. And, we've always said, our unicorn is a good example because our unicorn storyline promotes authenticity. And, we have said, we know that our price points are pretty premium for the plush market. Our snugglers on their own are around 40, or the bundle itself for the book and the creature are $44, but the book is $9.99. So, we're like, you can go get any stuffed unicorn and use this storyline with that unicorn. And so it really the heart is carried in the stories, not necessarily the actual plush. I think that the way that the plush evolved from kind of this handmade, hand-stitched look and simple design aesthetic was because of we just had no idea how to actually take a product to market. We just did what we knew what we could do. And it's evolved from that. But yeah, I don't know. I think the heart is carried in the storyline. So that's definitely been the big differentiator. But, when we got ourselves on Shark Tank in 2017, I always say we bootstrapped our way onto Shark Tank because I think it was our grit and tenacity that got us on that show. And, that was a big piece of feedback from the sharks was that the toy market is kind of brutal and a lot of them had been burned, especially in the world of plush toys. And so knowing our price point, they were a little bit wary about that. But I don't know. I think it's the direct connection with the consumer. We knew that the product didn't need to go make its way onto the shelves of Target and compete with the brands that are doing really well at Target. And that we needed to be able to tell our own story online and connect with the consumers that are using this in the way that it was intended to, be a resource and support and tool for their child. And so, yeah, definitely lives in the storyline.
How did the situation with the sharks turn out? Were you funded? Did you go away empty-handed?
Well, so that was our first pitch ever. We were completely bootstrapped before we went on there. And I think even filling out that 150-page application made us take the business a lot more seriously. It was the first time that we really started to nail down, okay, what is our mission and vision statement? What is our brand platform? What does strategy look like for the next 3 to 5 years? And it enabled us to really get on TV, tell our story, which was a very heartfelt and genuine story. And the devastating part was we didn't even get an offer. And we both were very thrown that we didn't get an offer, because at the time we were on track to do over $500,000 in sales that year and still being kind of like a local Pacific Northwest handmade brand. At that point, we had seamstresses that were helping us. So from a traction standpoint, we were like, there's no way we're not going to get an offer or a deal. And then we didn't even get an offer. And so we were both it was an emotional roller coaster. But one thing that happened was the day after we filmed, it was the day that news broke that Toys R Us had filed for bankruptcy. And so I think the Sharks knew a lot of information that we didn't even know about the traditional toy industry at that time. But it was a great learning lesson. And the editors and producers on the show really loved the mission and our story. And, the way that they edited our segment was really great. And we're just grateful for the opportunity to be on the show.
Yeah. And I can imagine. So you walk in, you're so excited. We are going to crush these sharks. You walk out, no offer. Yeah. The next day, the whole toy industry is in the toilet. Are you thinking are we just not going to do this? Is this destined not to happen? I mean, did you lose faith in the idea?
No, I mean, it was funny because, we walked in that tank with our athlete mindsets on, former basketball player here and Callie being the volleyball player. I mean, we walked in as athletes and then we walked out both sobbing. And so, but no, actually we woke up the next day and it was on the flight home from LA that we wrote our next book on the plane that was about growth mindset and kind of started the beginnings on the development of our character Narwhal. But Callie might be able to add some more color to that story too.
Wow. And what resilience, why? I mean, do you attribute that to your athlete background? You come out of getting, metaphorically punched in the face and right away. I mean, look, I mourn a lot of my failures, maybe too long, but it takes me a little longer to get going than to play right home. So I'm super impressed that you were able to right away, turn it around, say, look, we're still in this thing. What drives that?
I think it's for Callie and I, that's just sort of the way that we operate. And it does go into that athlete mentality. I think when we would play on teams, you lose a lot of games, you miss a lot of shots, you mess up all the time. There's failure constantly, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to get to the championship. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get to the top. And so there's always been that we have no doubt that we can do it. And maybe in the very beginning, we had some doubt, but we were taking it really lightly in terms of just being well, why not us? Why can't we do it? We're smart enough. We have the background. We have access now. Why wouldn't we be able to do it? And so just taking those steps and just viewing it as a learning experience always, and not, dwelling on the quote unquote failures. I mean, we still had a blast going and filming Shark Tank. What an opportunity. Okay. Yeah. We didn't get a deal and we hoped that they weren't going to portray us to look like, crazy people on TV or something. But it was a fun experience. And I think that's the real benefit for Callie and I both, is when we do it together, we're always having fun. So nothing really feels like a failure.
Yeah. And you mentioned you're both best friends, and what's hard about running a business and being business partners with your best friend?
I think it's been a journey. We thought we were close before we started Slumberkins, and now we just know even deeper levels of how close you can get to somebody. It's there's been a lot of stuff that we've had to get into, and I think the benefit has been that because we were friends for so long, there's a deep level of trust between us, that our friendship is so important to both of us. We're more like sisters than we are even friends, and that we deeply trust each other's thoughts and opinions. And, as a brand promoting emotional wellness, basically good relationships and attachment, if we're not able to model that as co-CEOs and best friends of the company, then what are we even doing here? And that means getting through the conflict and getting through hard times as well. So we do that by supporting each other, by both engaging in therapy ourselves and together, and really digging into personal growth alongside of each other.
Not only are you best friends, you're co-CEOs. That's like double whammy. So
yeah,
to hear that, like, are there conflicts that, arise at work, and how do you handle those?
I think we did like Callie said, we had to do a lot of deep work, and, it didn't actually become, I don't think we ever thought of it as an issue or like see the hurdles ahead in wanting to both kind of stay at the helm and drive the ship as long as we can. Until there was a couple instances, like in our first round of fundraising, a potential investor looked at us across the table and said, all right, well, which one of you is really in charge, and like kind of threw some like power dynamics at us. And then I think, again, like later down the road, there's been a couple times where people are like, oh, you guys are best friends. Like, you guys started a business together because you guys wanted to ruin your friendship. Like little comments like that, like threw us off a bit in the beginning, which made us go, okay, we need to like kind of prepare for this. And we need to get into understanding like what our triggers are, how are we both acting if and when we are triggered by something. And, we call it like being in our like shadow selves, and understanding too where both of us are going to default for each other. So we actually sat down together in a conference room, busted out a big like, giant Post-it, and made a Venn diagram to show, okay, what does Callie own? What does Callie own? And then what is it in the middle that we're going to trust each other, or what in the middle are like the shared things that we both have to be kind of consulted and come to an agreement on. But then the things outside of that, we're going to really trust and default to each other, so that we have always a united front to the team that we're leading. And I think that benefited us doing that very early on.
The magic of the Venn diagram. So when you were growing the company, and you had mentioned, when you launched that very first time at the craft fair, was it under the name Slumberkins?
No, we were originally, we were Spoon and Moon. And the backstory to that is that my maiden name is Spooner, and Callie, her husband, is a high school Spanish teacher and speaks Spanish fluently, and he calls her Luna. And so we made it Moon because we thought that was a really cute kind of like children's brand name. But then as the Slumberkins, and then also initially we titled them Slumberland Creatures. But then when we were doing our diligence around trademarks and IP, we discovered that Disney owns the word Slumberland. And so then we were like, okay, let's kind of rethink the name of the whole brand, because it is more representative of the product, because Spoon and Moon doesn't really make sense when you look at the product line. And so we knew that Slumber Sloth was kind of our main bestseller, and we really liked the word slumber, and we really liked that kins could represent kind of the creatures themselves. And also knowing that, parents are really finding that time to connect with their kids around the bedtime routine, even though we know that these stories can be used throughout the day at any given time, or even in the world of education. But it just made sense to call them Slumberkins. And so we kind of riffed off of the word slumber for a while. Callie had some funny variations of some brand names that she wanted to throw out there in the early days.
It's always a process naming. It's a lot of fun. And so you went to Slumberkins, and you're growing, and things are happening. You spin out of Shark Tank. We're now just not even a full, basically like about 4.5 years in business, if I'm doing the math correctly. And what does the business look like today?
Well, today we have 20 employees. We are 90% direct to consumers still. I think we've always kind of hovered around that number. We have over 60,000 customers in our database, and we are in development right now with the Jim Henson Company to produce a children's television series based on our characters. So there's a lot happening, and we couldn't be more excited about the the growth and the connection that we have with our community that we've built around the brand. It's just been steadily growing over 100% every year. And, we're just continuing to sprint to keep up with it and to keep exposing people to the brand.
And where can our listeners find out more about Slumberkins or purchase your products or even just learn more about the company?
So you can go to slumberkins.com, our e-commerce store. We are on Instagram, Facebook. We have a really awesome community, a Facebook group called the Slumberkins Social, where a lot of really amazing, authentic conversations are happening between parents, caregivers, teachers, around the topics that all of the Slumberkins address. It's an amazing group. Yeah. And so we just love connecting with everybody there. And then hopefully in the next year or so, you'll be able to see Slumberkins on the screen on a global streaming platform.
That'll be amazing. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but are you able to leave us with a short Slumberkins story?
Okay, sure. So I will read the Bigfoot storyline written. It's, obviously my favorite character, and I hope you all enjoy it. One fine day, while walking through the trees, Bigfoot heard campers, so he went to look and see. Hiding out of sight, he began to understand why Big Feet steered clear of these creatures called man. Bigfoot doesn't exist. He's not even real. He's ugly and hairy and eats dirt for meals. What a lame creature to have in the woods. Why not a unicorn, a Loch Ness, or even Robin Hood? Bigfoot couldn't help the tears in his eyes. He wondered, how could they say that? I'm such a nice guy. Bigfoot ran from the campsite and counted 1, 2, 3. Taking deep breaths, he had to calm down, you see. After hearing those words, he wanted to curl up and hide. How could Bigfoot stop feeling so bad inside? Here is the secret. I'll tell it to you. It will help our friend Bigfoot, and maybe you too. When people are mean and make you feel down, you can believe in yourself and then look around. There are always more people, parents, teachers, and friends who you can talk to or be with to help your heart mend. Every time you hear something that makes you feel bad, tell yourself something that makes you feel glad. Repeat after me. If you think these are true, let's make Bigfoot feel better, and maybe you too. I am kind. I am strong. I am brave and unique. The world is better because I am here. I like me.
And that is the story of Slumberkins. Thank you to Callie and Callie for sharing their story, and a big thank you to Bigfoot for sharing his. A little known fact, I have a special spot in my heart for Bigfoot. Many years ago, I wrote a screenplay about Bigfoot. It hasn't sold yet, and I may just have to dust that one off and revisit it. Well, that's the show. Until next time. Make sure to visit our website, www.wildstory.com, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS, so you'll never miss an episode.
I like big stories and I cannot lie. You other storytellers can't deny.